Welcome to the Animal Based Dad podcast, the show where metabolic health meets mental health. Through expert interviews and topic deep dives, we unpack why looking after the body is central to looking after the mind. So sit back and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Animal Based Dad podcast. I'm your host, Ricky C. My guest today is Mr. Benjiman Boyd. Benjamin, you are a postgraduate student at Niagara University Graduate School. You're doing a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, bit of a mouthful. But you've also done a couple other certifications via McLean Hospital, I believe. It's metabolic theory for mental illness, brain energy, of Chris Palmer's work, and also managing major mental illness with dietary change. So you are my first bona fide metabolic health, mental health expert guest. And you've joined us just after I've relaunched the podcast. You're, in fact, the second guest after the relaunch, where the specific focus is now the metabolic health, mental health link and trying to make that accessible for the public, in particular, the families and professionals who work with children with special needs, of which I am one. So welcome to the show, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation, Ricky. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome. Ben, I wonder if you wouldn't mind, for the audience, just giving a brief description of your background. How did you get interested in the metabolic health, mental health connection, and what led you down the road of academia?
So I came upon metabolic psychiatry kind of at a convergence of two interests, I guess. One of which being out of necessity for my own health. I was, 300 plus pounds, pre-diabetic, had all kinds of skin issues, autoimmune issues, growing up. About 14, I was considered pre-diabetic. It wasn't a formal diagnosis, but my physician had told my mother that we needed to start getting something straightened out before it would become the actual type 2 diagnosis. So I went through all different kinds of dietary changes. Tried low calorie, low fat course. Did a couple of cleanses, all different kinds of stuff. My mom was really into nutrition, even growing up. Of course, it was for the most part misled nutrition. But soon enough, my stepdad informed my mom about a paleo-based ketogenic diet. So, not necessarily strictly the macronutrient goal, but more so eating fat-based diets based upon your particular lineage. So in my case, it would be because I'm mostly Scottish descent, at least, it's a lot of animal meats like bison, elk, depending on where in that lineage you'd actually pinpoint at. But so I tried it for a couple months with my mom and stepdad, and I just started feeling better.
Nice.
It was quite miraculous compared to all the other diets, because it was within 5 months that a lot of my symptoms were gone. My weight had gone down. I was now able to go and kind of retrieve back my old physical activities that I enjoyed as a kid. And I eventually, as a high school dropout, went back to school and went into a grad program. But before that, I had stumbled upon a human services course that was offered to us as people going in as adult educated, or in adult education programs that you didn't have a high school diploma yet for. It was offered free. Otherwise, it'd be a particular fee. So I was like, okay, might as well. It was more geared toward kind of as soon as you got the diploma, you would be able to go out and do so and so many jobs with this particular
Okay.
certificate being a driving force to get you in it. Um, and I thought that's all I was going to do. But um, as I got into reading more about it, just the counseling profession, learning about different theoretical models. Of course, it was a it was a lot of forward thinking considering
Mm,
uh, I was still like at the high school level. Um, but I wanted to do it, and I enjoyed uh, kind of fantasizing about being the guy who would be there to hand you a tissue when you had like this breakthrough moment
nice. Okay.
in a therapy session. So after a little while, I thought, what's the underlying mechanisms behind the ketogenic diet? I wanted to know more because I understood it like a surface level. You're
Mm,
switching your fuel from glucose to fat, and that seems to have a systemic, net benefit to your entire body. But I wanted to know more about the biochemistry and strictly like the brain biochemistry.
mm,
And that has led me down to the road I'm taking today, which is brain bioenergetics for borderline personality disorder.
nice.
Uh, though we have a lot of, or at least a good deal of emerging evidence on the efficacy of ketogenic therapies for schizophrenia and bipolar.
Hmm.
um, there's a lot of overlapping neurobiology between those psychiatric disorders and borderline personality disorder, which I think if we weren't willing to explore uh, this intervention in this particular population, would be kind of an oversight considering what I've seen so
Mm,
far in my, couple years, of course, limited amount of time researching on it. So yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at
mm,
now, continuing my master's and, doing my little independent projects on the side.
nice. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So I, I mean, you and I know each other, have known each other for a little while now. We've been in contact for a bit. And I follow the literature on metabolic psychiatry quite closely as well. And I bang on about it a fair bit on my social media channels. But I've got the rare opportunity here of letting you explain some of the stuff without me sort of leading, so to speak. Um, you've mentioned there that you've had limited exposure to some of the clinical evidence. I know what they're doing with metabolic interventions, both as adjuncts and primary therapies. What are you seeing? Well, just walk us through what are the improvements you're seeing? What's the efficacy like? What does it work for? What doesn't it work for? Like without making any grand claims or anything, but just on the ground, on the shop floor, what's actually happening?
Yeah, well, it seems as though, at least in schizophrenia and bipolar, the main driver that seems to beget clinical outcomes. And there was a major study by Dr. Ian Campbell and a couple of colleagues with him at the University of Edinburgh,
Mm,
that um, the balance between the two neurotransmitters, glutamate and gamma aminobutyric acid or GABA, um, are ultimately what's being modulated when you're introducing a ketogenic diet.
mm,
And this has been kind of proven not as much in the literature we have on ketogenic diets so far, but more so the that which ketogenic diets are mimicking, which is fasting. We
mhm,
have a lot more literature on fasting and exercise and the neurobiological implications of that. And it can kind of be translated as evidenced by new ketogenic diet studies, um, uh, in this particular population. So it seems to modulate GABA, which is the main inhibitory neurotransmitter, and glutamate is kind of the excitatory, but it's not quite that simple. So when you have a certain level of glutamate and a certain level of GABA, it then kind of creates different cascades across the brain, which trigger neuromodulators outside of the GABA and glutamate balance. So a lot of people think of neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin,
Hmm.
oxytocin as main drivers of neurobiological change. Um, and it's just not the case. What it seems to be, because I think about 90%, or no, sorry, 80% of the neural activity in the brain is largely glutamatergic. It's more so these particular idiosyncratic modulations of using these serotonin receptor, or these serotonin excretions, dopaminergic excretions, um, that kind of create this complex activation across different neural networks. So this is a great thing because we know that it seems as though, according to magnetic resonance spectroscopy studies that measure direct, if not direct levels of glutamate, direct metabolites which implicate glutamate,
Hmm.
that um, the ketogenic diet kind of suppresses that, and we assume it's from GABAergic activity because it's the only inhibitory neurotransmitter that directly regulates GABA, or
Hmm.
sorry, glutamate.
Yeah.
Uh, um, so it's kind of up for debate right now how that actually works, but you can kind of look at the exercise literature and the fasting literature to get a better scope. There's all different kinds of reactions that happen on a cellular level when you do particular forms of exercise, different forms of fasting. But ultimately, what you're doing when you're giving a proximal amount of stress to the mitochondria, it develops all these different kind of molecular cascades that seem to be beneficial. There's stuff like one particular one that comes to mind is the sirtuin family. So there's a particular it's a particular protein that kind of creates mitochondrial integrity and allows for a bit more, I guess, excitotoxic punch. When you're
Hmm.
when you're undergoing certain forms of stress in the body, it I believe, of course, I I have limited uh, uh, research on this, but SIRT3 in particular seems to be neuroprotective in a way that's um, it's hard to explain because there's all different kind of other enzymatic activities, and I can't remember the exact metabolic pathway, whether it's the TCA cycle or oxidative phosphorylation, but um, yeah, there. I guess we can go back to the overarching idea is that we know a good deal that certain levels of fasting stress, exercise stress on mitochondria seems to proliferate new mitochondria in different connections that strengthen either GABAergic or glutamatergic activity in certain regions. Um, uh, of course, in borderline personality disorder in particular, there's a few that kind of are relative to what seems to be a more phenomenological view of it all, because unlike schizophrenia and bipolar, where it's strictly either voices or mood states that depending on the person you can be quite cognizant of. It's kind of interpersonally dependent.
Hmm.
The mood fluctuations and emotion dysregulation in borderline. Um, Borderline disorder is characterized by extreme instability in moods,
Hmm.
extreme idealization and devaluation of certain people. What I mean by that is that when you're talking to someone and you have a nice interaction, you're kind of thinking, oh, this is a pleasant chap. You're gonna maybe talk again.
Hmm.
If there's a particular emotional arousal which makes you deduce this kind of thing, you put it in a filter that places it upon a value hierarchy within your brain. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? You think of them as like, oh, you're going to think of them differently than say your best friend, as
Mm.
like compared to someone you really don't like, as someone you compare
Yeah.
to your spouse, etc. In borderline, it seems as though the idealization is extremely high. So if there's an extremely good interaction or a good connective conversation, you think of this person as the absolute pinnacle, like they are the greatest
Yeah.
person in the world. There's nothing in the world that they couldn't do that's wrong, and you treat them as such. You talk to them all
Yeah.
the time, and um, it's almost like kind of an obsession, really. But
Mm.
the minute they do something wrong that kind of that disrupts the dynamic that you want, it's complete devalue. It's like they're the worst person in the world. I never should have gotten a hold of them.
Yeah.
It could result in anger outbursts. It could resolve or it could result in, you know, texting them for hours on end of how terrible they are. And like it's the entire conceptualization can really it can't be uh fully understood in just a singular interaction. I could give a plenty of examples, but um it's that devaluation and
Yeah.
idealization that kind of
I've
fluctuates depending
witnessed
on.
that myself, and it's you sort of
Oh yeah,
zero to
okay.
hero, boom, like instantly, and then the reversal just as quick, and you're like, what just happened?
Right. Right. So what I'm thinking of is like, you know, it's easy enough to say that it's just a psychological flaw and that it's not something that can be mitigated in any way other than having some kind of, psychotherapy or medication cocktail that can lessen symptoms, I guess. Um, but like this is kind of reflected in the entire field of BPD research. I mean, we have four, I believe, almost four or five different therapies that emerged out of an attempt to specialize in BPD based psychotherapy. Despite that, we have a series of meta-analyses that have shown, at least, so it's a little complex. So there's relatively high dropout rates depending on the reviews you see. It's
Mhm.
between 10 and 55% depending on the population. And there's different demographics, those with high functioning borderlines, it wouldn't be the same as like the
Yeah.
same demographic as you'd see in a study of inpatient
Yeah.
or like intensive inpatient facilities. But it's between 10 and 50. I think the highest I've seen is 50%, which is an extremely high amount.
Mm.
And so far, it seems like the the success rate is fairly high, but only if they undergo psychotherapy all the way until termination, which is fairly rare. It's between 10 and 58%.
Yeah.
So if they get through it, it seems as though that they're okay. They
Okay.
seem to
Yeah.
thrive as they go on, but after a little bit, if they don't stick with it, it's often a lost cause.
Yeah.
Um, so you can think of it from a metabolic lens as not just a psychological flaw, but a bioenergetic adaptation.
Mm.
Because the way in which your body regulates is through top-down functions, which are extremely metabolically expensive.
Hmm.
To use your prefrontal cortex for every single executive decision throughout the day, depending on how busy you are, it's very effortsome. It's a lot
Mhm.
a lot harder, especially if you have interpersonal dynamics, social determinants, and all kinds of metabolic issues that you're trying to manage throughout the day. Um, so what borderline personality could be conceptualized as is like, okay, we have all of these emotional fluctuations or these lashing out of or devaluing of a person or idealizing of a person through a kind of heuristic that's metabolically inexpensive compared to things that are like relatively normative behavior. So instead of idealizing them, you have you understand it as a connective conversation, and that though you would be happy to see them again and have a conversation with them again, you're not going to,
Yeah,
message them 20 times out of the day to get their attention.
yeah,
You're chasing this ideal. And same thing with the devaluation piece. It's just,
mm,
you're lashing out because the way in which borderlines understand their identity is through other people. It's a reflection of other people.
yeah,
So if they don't have that stability in the other person, if they don't have that control, it's very unsettling, and
yeah,
they'll do anything to get it back. So that kind of self-discovery that both in physiology and like understanding yourself on a psychological level, it takes a lot of work. Um,
yeah,
and it depends on whether it's collective or individualist societies, but um, ultimately it's metabolically expensive. And what you're doing is having your brain reinforce what seems to be psychopathological behavior. um, and I hope that, given the idiosyncrasies of certain neural networks, we could, find ways to show this metabolic deficiency. We had tried to. I just got back from a research conference in Switzerland talking about this. We had
yeah.
tried uh, kind of connecting the dots, or we tried connecting the dots through a particular study on women with borderline personality disorder and a comorbid uh, diagnosis of diabetes, or I believe it was um, comparing BPD cohorts with type 2 diabetics cohorts. And there was a particular area, the left anterior insula. It deals with interoception a little bit, but also emotion processing and error correction.
Hmm.
Um, and both networks go off during delayed discounting tasks in both type 2 diabetics and BPD cohorts, or at least there seems to be a hyperactivation in this certain area, so like a hyperarousal sense in this area, um, in both cohorts. And I thought, like, well, that's a decent connection to show like the metabolic side effects of it, because we already know that there's a bidirectional relationship in multiple studies of BPD and metabolic syndrome in general. That could
Yeah,
be type 2 diabetes, that could be obesity, even Alzheimer's disease really could be considered that. But yeah, it's right now we're at a point where there's a lot of dots that you could connect to BPD and metabolism, but there's still just so much left to explore, really.
yeah. No, for
So
sure, for sure. So you're getting deep into the sort of mechanics of it all there, the pathways, how.
trying to.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fascinating stuff. I'm just cognizant that many of the audience may not have that depth at the moment. So if we were to step back, and the way I like to explain metabolic health, now Dr. Palmer goes as deep as the mitochondria, which is absolutely correct. I like to step it back and summarize it as just your health at the level of the individual cell,
Mhm.
assuming that everything that that cell needs in order to perform its function correctly is provided for and catered for. That is metabolic health. If that cell can do its job, healthy. If it can't do its job, compromised. What you're suggesting there, and I like that you touched on the bidirectional nature of it. Um, it goes towards Dr. Palmer's main idea, his main hypothesis of mitochondrial health, in his case, metabolic health, as I would summarize it, being a central pathway in both disease onset and potentially then disease reversal, or at least improvement in the management thereof. Are you seeing in the clinical setting improvements in management?
Um, well, I mean, I wouldn't say that I have much clinical experience with BPD cohorts. I've done plenty of research, but um, I have yet to actually conduct studies of any kind. Um, but yeah, it just seems to make sense because on the cellular level, um, glucose just doesn't seem to be as advantageous compared to ketones.
Mm-hmm.
So in the entire cycle of glycolysis all the way down to ATP, there's a couple of different steps it has to take that also require ATP to get there. So the entire glycolysis metabolic pathway, which turns ultimately glucose into pyruvate, which then turns into acetyl coenzyme A and gets put into the citric acid cycle. All of that requires, or all of that is ultimately used to make two ATP molecules.
Mm.
And your uh or sorry, four ATP molecules, but it takes a little bit of ATP to make it. So you're only netting two ATP
Yeah.
molecules. Where with ketones, you're completely bypassing glycolysis through beta oxidation to get right into it, goes straight, takes free fatty acids into the liver, performs a process called beta oxidation, which then goes into acetyl coenzyme A, all the way into oxidative phosphorylation. And the entire process where it turns into ATP seems as though there's less free radical proliferation because this seems to happen in glycolysis as well. And I guess it all depends on the actual the way in which you get glucose.
Mm.
But ultimately, you're netting more ATP molecules um, um, per metabolic process through
Yeah.
ketone metabolism over glucose metabolism. And that's simply ATP production.
Mm.
This, like, we can also go into the way in which it um, inhibits a particular inflammatory cascade. You know, there's different items like uh, interleukin 6 and 3 that are ultimately inhibited. It's a major immune response when it comes to glucose metabolism, I believe. And um,
Sorry, Ben, just before we get too deep down that, I just want to rewind quickly. So for the audience, ATP is your actual energy source. That is what your body runs on. So you don't run on calories per se.
Right.
ATP is your actual energy currency. And what you've described there is that using ketones is more efficient at ATP production versus using glucose.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it improves cellular efficiency. Is that a correct
Right,
summary
yeah.
of that?
Yeah, and it also produces different neurotrophic factors in the brain, at least.
Mm.
And this is shown in strictly from fasting studies and exercise studies. So beta hydroxybutyrate, the main driving ketone for most of these metabolic processes, seems to promote not just BDNF, but seems to inhibit inflammatory families. So they call
Mm,
them like
mm,
inflammasomes. There's different families of inflammasomes that ultimately emerge through inflammatory processes, just as a survival mechanism of the body.
yeah.
But BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, um, ultimately begets mitochondrial biogenesis, which is just a process by which your body creates and positions different mitochondria in neural networks.
Mm,
Uh, whether it is in a certain brain region that you do promote mitochondrial biogenesis depends on the activity and the reinforcers that kind of precede what you're or that come before the
hmm
particular activity. But um, it's all relatively a good thing, you know.
mm,
Of course, those previous studies um, had talked more about calorie restriction rather than a ketogenic diet or intermittent fasting. But many of the calorie restriction models that they used, either in rats or human studies, was every other day eating patterns. So ultimately fasting or in a ketogenic
yeah,
state.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's wicked exciting stuff to get into the actual um, the the ketogenic diet studies because not
Mm,
many people, especially like vulnerable populations like schizophrenia and bipolar, can just up and start all of these extremely metabolically healthy interventions without some kind of help, some kind of
yeah.
dietary intervention over say intense exercise or prolonged fasting.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's obviously it's not exactly the same as the cohorts that you're looking at, but my little boy is turning 5 next week. In fact, end of this week. He is level 3 autistic, but he's undergoing assessment for ARFID, avoidance restricted food intake disorder. So we are hoping that with the right interventions from an occupational therapist, we'll be able to introduce different foods because at the moment the sensory issues are such that he just will not have other foods. He's got like one safe food, which is a particular porridge, and then he's got
Okay.
two junk foods that he enjoys, Oreos and Doritos. And we do what we can to restrict Oreos and Doritos, but even the porridge is it's not a great source of nutrition. Now we'll make it with whole milk and we'll add some vitamins, like a little vitamin sachet to that, trying to get him bioavailable essential nutrients where we can. But to try and move him, I am pretty confident that if we were able to move him onto a sort of species appropriate ketogenic approach,
Mm.
one that is predominantly animal based, so he's getting the essential nutrients in their bioavailable form at source, would significantly improve his cognitive outcomes. Not cure autism per se, but just improve his ability to do things, his ability to communicate, his ability to self-regulate, his ability to navigate the world around him. Um, so yeah, I get your point there about like the vulnerable population not
Mhm.
easily accessing this, and they need that help. They need a little bit of OT
So
guidance to get them into it.
could you describe for me like the difference in levels? I'm not familiar with that.
So, best I understand it, level 1 would essentially be your high functioning, um,
Okay.
practically inseparable from your average population, except for a few quirks, shall we say. Level 2 will be a little bit more intense, perhaps more socially awkward, have more struggles with certain things, but for all intents and purposes, still on track to be a functional member of society.
Mhm.
Level 3 is the most extreme version. So for my boy, he's 5 years old, but he's got the language. He's no longer nonverbal. He's what they define as pre-verbal. So he's got the language of maybe like an 18 to 24-month-old, where he
Okay.
can use certain words and maybe put short sentences of 2, 3 words together in context, trying to communicate with you. But that's as far as his vocabulary, his expression of vocabulary has gotten. He understands a lot more and he can follow instructions
Right.
and that sort of thing, but he can't talk back as such. And his sensory issues are extreme. So he'll
Oh,
stim, he'll make like clicking sounds with his mouth, and he'll do weird things with his hands. He'll avoid eye contact, and if situations get a little bit over like stimulating for him, he'll just shut down, or he'll go nuclear, like full blown
oh,
meltdown, throw himself on the floor, self harm. Like so,
wow.
the sensory overload in the level 3, it can be a challenge. Now, it's not all cookie cutter. So then not two individuals are not necessarily the same. So the categorization gets a bit messy. But level 3 in general is the most severe. And then level 2 would be your sort of medium ground. Level 1 is the least severe.
Okay. Yeah, I have a cousin who's about that. He's, I believe, oh gosh, he's almost 21 now. Wow. My
Mm,
gosh, we're getting old. So yeah, my experience is limited, but we had kind of worked on well, I wouldn't say we, I'd say my uncle and my other cousin, who was his sister, um had worked with a lot of different behavior analysts, and it's like a similar pattern, right? You have those particular foods, and it's
mm,
usually like the junky food, and
yeah.
there's different tics and social cues. He's considered nonverbal, but he's slow, or well, was considered nonverbal, but he's slowly learning like how to not necessarily create conversation, but
Mm,
he's able to reflect back, commands, or he's able to understand a lot of
yeah.
different
Yeah. Yeah.
instruction and stuff. But he has limited vocabulary, and it's often that it would more so be out of a instruction that he say something.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And that is, yeah. My boy will, he will copy a lot of what you say to him. So you'll
mm,
ask him something and he'll repeat back to you what he's hearing. But so far as using things in context out of his own, it's quite limited. It is improving, but I am hoping with this assessment going now, once the diagnosis is confirmed, we get the occupational therapist assigned. I'm hoping that we can get to the point where we can introduce a ketogenic diet or at least something similar, whole food, animal based, just to try and give his brain function that little boost and just the platform from which he can then hopefully thrive.
mm. And maybe some exogenous ketones wouldn't be that bad too, to just
Yeah, if we
introduce
could,
the brain.
yeah, if we could find a way to sneak it in, because yeah, I've tried. It
Oh
didn't
yeah,
work well.
yeah. Well, darn.
Yeah, no,
That's like
we're
it's.
making good progress with him. Actually, it's quite annoying because we weaned him off the porridges and stuff, and we got him onto the little weaning sachets of like baby purees. And
Mhm.
then over time, I started blending up like meat, like mince. Lamb mince was his favorite. And there's a
Oh, okay.
particular like a tinned tomato sauce that I would use as a base because all the tomato based baby purees he seemed to enjoy. And I'd blend up lamb mince, and so you'd have a sachet of puree, but I would add the mince blend into that. So it was a similar texture and flavor, but just to get the nutritional content higher. And he was doing well with those. He was doing really well. But then he started school last September, but he was placed into a mainstream school. And all credit to the school. They've got a separate classroom where the special needs kids go. So reception, year 1, year 2, it's infant school. Um, and the teachers there are really well meaning, but they're just not equipped, not for someone of his level. And so he's
Okay.
regressed insanely, like really, really regressed in September last year, and more so on the food intake than anything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've been knocked like right back to square one. back on baby porridge and needing to start from there again.
Well, I'm hoping for the best. That could definitely be
Yeah,
tough.
I was saying to Chris last week, it's a marathon. It's how I've come to think of it. So the goal, as an autism parent, the goal is to get your child to be a successful, independent adult. Now, that exactly what that looks like will vary from person to person, situation to situation, culture to culture, but independent, able to live on his own, and hopefully even have his own family. Like that's the goal. There's a long road between here and there, a very long road. It's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. There's no one intervention that's magically going to fix it all. It's consistency and adding intervention after intervention as we move forward to help him continue to develop and gain that independence. Hopefully it works. That's at least the aim and the goal. But man, it's hard work. It's
Yeah, I
really
can
hard
imagine.
work.
Well, I thought about this too. Like, was it your personal success with animal-based eating or metabolic interventions that made you think that it was going to be more significantly impactful on your son than it would be other interventions, or was it just the science that said, it
It
was
was more just the science. So for me, I had tremendous success going ketogenic in 2018 and then eventually carnivore. And then carnivore was in 2022. And I've settled more or less on what I would call animal based, not Paul Saladino's version. And I hate that he got to the term before I did. Um, but hypercarnivore is probably the most apt description in that at least 70 to 80% of what I consume is all animal meat, animal products. But then
right.
I do augment it with 20 to 30% plants and fungi to taste. It doesn't necessarily add to the nutritional content, anything that the animal products
Just simply like
can't
wanting
give,
to have.
but just for a bit of variety, a bit of continuity. Having had the success there and developing the obsession that I have with metabolic health in general, I started off as a nutrition guy. Nutrition was the be all and end all of everything. But then as I matured, shall we say, started to realize, well, no, in fact, if you look around, you've sort of got different camps of people and they all swear that their thing is the thing, right? So the exercise tribe swear by exercise, the diet tribe swear by diet, the light exposure tribe do the same, the cold plunge tribe do the same. Like everyone, like their shtick is the thing. But
Yep.
no, in fact, it's just metabolic health is a complex jigsaw puzzle. And there's
Yeah.
lots of different levers that you can pull to improve your own. And if you come to understand metabolic health as being this complex jigsaw puzzle, you understand that there's lots of different things that you could do to help improve yours. And it's not all
Oh yeah.
about one, and you don't have to be tribal and invested in a particular camp. So I knew enough from the biology literature to know that getting him the very best nutritional platform is the best way to support his brain development, especially through these early years, because there's windows in brain development now through infancy into sort of early childhood that once those windows close, they're closed for life. And I don't want to miss them. So stressful as this is, I like you kind of put the pressure on yourself because you're like, it's now or never. Like you can't
Yeah.
tell his biology, no, just it's been a rough week. Wait, not going to wait.
Yeah. You always have to put the brakes on once in a while. But it's
Yeah.
good that you're aware of that because it's something that my research mentors have told me a lot too. It's like you don't want to come at this from a ketogenic lens, especially in clinical research
Mm.
or in neuroscience research, because there's just so much out there that talks about so many different outcomes. Like there are like despite being what seems to be a transdiagnostic intervention for all different kinds of psychiatric disorders, and autoimmune conditions and Alzheimer's and other like neurodevelopmental disorders. Uh, there are still other dietary interventions out there that have given similar outcomes depending
Mm,
on the study design. Of course, there are some that paint other diets in a terrible picture. Like,
mhm,
for instance, when I was doing undergrad work at St. Lawrence University, which is like a neighboring one to my original undergrad, we had a behavioral neuroscience course where we would conduct our own mice studies or rat studies, and it would be a part of like an independent research project. And there was one particular classmate that did a an exercise intervention or weight management intervention, um, showing the efficacy of calorie restriction over a high fat diet. And on the in the results section, it obvious clearly said that those that restricted calories had lower BMI, less inflammatory markers. I think there were some where they would get post-mortem hippocampal slices that would show less activity in certain areas in like the high fat cohort than not. But what you don't see on the outside, if they don't put it down strictly in the methods section, is that their version of a high fat diet was not ketogenic,
yeah.
and that they had used Crisco as their high fat source.
Mm,
So not only are they using like the worst of the worst in terms of fat source, they
yeah.
are also adding their normal feed into the study. It's high fat, but it's also high carb. So
Yeah, that's your
it's really
basic
skewing.
standard
Yeah.
Western diet. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just skewing the entire research,
Mm.
the entire results, and that kind of was something I had to, you know, uh, wallow with for a little bit until I finished the course. But yeah, it's just an example. But at
Mm,
the same time, there are like I don't know if you've heard of this, but there's like all sugar diets where it's like
mm,
they up like a bunch of sugar, no protein, no fat. And like for some reason, there are people who lose a bunch of weight or they have better better exercise performance or something like that at within a certain time
yeah,
window.
for short
I
term. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not too sure, but that I have heard of things like that happening. So
yeah.
it isn't the end all be all, but after a while, when you see across all different kinds of studies, you have to at least give it a chance, you know,
Yeah, oh, for
at
sure.
least show some of the clinicians who don't know about it, what it can do
Mm,
for at least some psychiatric disorders. BPD in particular, it's reasonable that it's not necessarily explored right now because it's a very small population compared
mm,
to um, things like bipolar and schizophrenia, depression, anxiety.
yeah.
It's a very small subset, and there's been controversy of the entire diagnostic process of BPD for years.
Mm,
They had just recently gone away with the various axes and clusters of personality disorders, which kind of screwed up the way you diagnose it nowadays in the DSM-5. Um, I think that they're still debating whether or not to bring back clusters within the personality diagnosis. Um, but it's just to say that there is still, of course, you know, cultural isolations within BPD diagnosis. It depends on the demographic, like whether you're taking from one cohort to the other, one that's like, for instance, with autism, like
mm,
there's going to be different results of a cohort that's level 1 compared to a cohort that's level 3.
yeah.
it's just not going to be the same. And that's reflected in the neurobiology literature in BPD. However, there are a few that at least in terms of levels it can fluctuate, but there's a distinct neurobiological phenotype that kind of shows across different studies.
Okay.
You have the normal, or I say normal, but it's just relative to a lot of different psychiatric
Mm.
disorders. Hyperactivity in lower, like at least emotional arousal circuits. So, like, of course, the amygdala and the way that's processed through the limbic system, and then hypoactivation in frontal circuits. But there's a distinct connection between, as I said earlier, the left anterior insula and the anterior
Mm.
cingulate cortex, which is a network that works directly with error correction and emotion regulation. There are certain areas that work with it, a part of the insula that has to do with interoception, or the way in which you appraise emotional or physiological stimuli, which can maybe explain the misinterpretation of interpersonal dynamics
Mm.
within BPD. But ultimately, there's dysregulation in these areas, and um, uh, what I'm hoping to show is that through maybe behavior modification or behavior measurement like delay discounting, um, we can show that metabolic metabolic differences correlate to steeper delay discounting. So that brings me to this particular intervention. So delay discounting is a behavior analysis strategy by which you can measure the propensity to choose shorter, sooner rewards over larger, later rewards.
Mm.
And they have different assessments by which they can measure that, but ultimately it's goes down to a neurocognitive decision making model that shows whether or not you would choose this particular reward now, but it's shorter or less valuable, or
Yeah.
of less quantity over a larger one later on.
Yeah.
And that was also a diagnostic, or a psychometric that was shown across both type 2 diabetics and BPD cohorts as well. So that was another connection that I had made in my research. So I think that with that, there's a million and one different ways that you could go about exploring it, especially if you have the resources, like PET scans, magnetic resonance
Yeah.
spectroscopy machines, and um, even Dr. Martin Picard, who has all different kinds of cool gadgets at Columbia, where you
Yeah.
can actually show the distinct, like, mitotype, or the
Yeah.
positioning and morphology of the mitochondria within certain neural networks to really gauge what it is that's going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, for now,
I've got a good mate, Neil Friedman, who like fangirls out on Martin Picard.
yeah,
Neil, I'm sorry.
no,
Yeah, he
he's
does.
a, oh
He's
my gosh.
major fan, and yeah, I mean, Dr. Picard's work is astounding in the
Mhm.
field of bioenergetics. It's revolutionary stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah, so it's really cool. I just hope that people kind of get their ears perked up a little bit about the BPD population, because
Mm.
it's a really tough diagnosis to treat. Um, and it's really difficult, especially for not just the clinicians, but for the people in their lives who
Mm.
actually
Mm.
love them
Yeah, no, for sure.
and want the best for them, because it's it's a long, long road if you can't um, get through that, as you were saying, that particular developmental period where personality solidifies
Mm.
around like 20 to 25. That seems to be where it's like a make or break. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just hoping that maybe ketogenic therapies could be kind of an adjunct for the psychotherapies that's been made or constructed for BPD.
Yeah, I think 100%. And I come at it from a slightly different angle, and I look at it because I've come up through the metabolic health space, and primarily my interest in metabolic health was just trying to fix my own well-being, like not even mental. I was just trying to fix my physical well-being because something was going wrong. I was active in training, but I was getting fatter and fatter and fatter. And it wasn't just like I was getting old. I was in my mid 30s, like
Mhm.
hardly over the hill, but I was in terrible state. Like I wake up in the morning, I couldn't even put socks on. My lower back was so inflamed and sore.
Oh,
And there was no injury to explain that. In fact, I went through the whole diagnostic process, and I sat down with the orthopedic surgeon. He was like, idiopathic mechanical lower back pain, which basically means we don't know what causes it. There's nothing wrong with your joint, but something in the joint's not happy, and you're just going to have to live with it. It's like, this is dumb.
yeah.
um, but the thing that I didn't expect, and I hadn't put it together at the time, and I spoke about it a little bit on Martin Gillespie's podcast a couple of years back. I was facing cognitive decline in terms of mood, ability to concentrate, brain fog. I was just a miserable bastard all the time. My wife and I were fighting a lot. I swore it was her. She swore it was me. Turns out she was right. And I wasn't in a good place. And when I went ketogenic, that really improved. Like my mental health improved significantly. And that surprised me because I'd never tied those two together before. And so the road that led me on was to start thinking, okay, well, why does that happen? What is it that's going on here? And the best I can tell is when you get out of your own way and you start giving your biology the inputs and stimuli that it actually expects and needs, then you can trust your biology to do what it should be doing, and that is to heal and to try and thrive. And I wonder if that's not maybe a good way to think about this because and I appreciate your point, like the metabolic psychiatry field is emergent. It's not well established, it's not concrete yet. It's explorative to a large extent, and the clinical evidence is very new as well. So we don't have tons of randomized controlled trials and all the gold standard evidence base to tell us that yes, this does this and that does that, and this is safe and that's not safe, and so on and so forth. But I wonder if that's not maybe losing a little bit of the value here, because coming back down to just basic biology, we know what our essential nutrients are. We know which forms of them are bioavailable to us, which aren't. We know that our body needs physical movement regularly, both types, intense and non-intense. We know that we need sleep, quality sleep of a certain amount every single day. We know that we need natural light exposure, full spectrum natural light exposure. We know that artificial light exposure interferes with us at a biological level. We know that being outside in nature profoundly impacts our microbiome just through exposure to the surrounding microbiome. So maybe it's the case that metabolic health, and then going back to Dr. Palmer's theory, is a central pathway of sorts. And if you just understand and give your body what it needs and expects, you can expect improved outcomes. Not necessarily, and actually, I like this because it's something I bang on about all the time. It's something that it won't do. So if, let's say, you get everything right, you eat well, you train, you sleep well, you're getting natural light exposure, you're spending time out in nature, you're doing all the basic lifestyle foundational things correct, it does not magic your life into sunshine and rainbows by any
Yep.
stretch of the imagination. Storms of life still come, the stresses of life still come, life is still messy and chaotic. But what it does for you is it puts you in a position where, A, physically, your body is in the best possible state it can be to face the everyday life and to recover from whatever's going on. And then mentally, you are more resilient than what you would be if you were metabolically compromised. And so I wonder if it would be accurate to say that for the audience listening, if they were to understand and to focus on their metabolic health from the perspective of it being something that they can do to invest into their resilience, their grit or toughness to face all the hardships of life, that's probably where they should start, square one.
Right. And it just depends on the person where you start, because uh it's hard to say, or hard to encompass metabolic well-being and metabolic health into a single start point, you know. I
100%.
think
Yeah.
yeah, and I think of it as like, your proximal area by which you can start improving your life to a point which it is not regressing, or which is not uh, kind of resulting in a extreme or significant regression in another domain of your
Mm.
life. So like when you're, say, starting a new gym routine, you're not just going to go off the deep end with all of this, with like a 40-hour work week and kids, family responsibilities, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's unrealistic. You want to start with, say, I don't know, 1 day a week with low weights. You could even just walk for 15, 20
Yeah.
minutes. And that's just a little bit of a nudge in the right direction. And that kind of unlocks your body's metabolic flexibility. And then you soon realize the way in which your body adapts to meet the new demand of your life. So
Yeah.
Martin Picard's energy resistance principle kind of says it at a real, fundamental level. He goes into thermodynamics and the way in which, energy flux then kind of creates for more production in different domains, but it also requires resistance in another domain. So what
Mm.
we're hoping is that resistance of that which used to be a bad habit can replace the resistance of a normal habit, so you can then provide
Yeah.
energy flow or energy flux to that given area.
Yeah.
That's a macro level understanding, but I go back to it when I think of uh, foundational ways of conceptualizing it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, you gotta go at your own pace. Your body knows, relatively speaking, what to do. Um, you have to give yourself grace from time to time. Um, but ultimately, with the intention of progressing and bettering yourself, that your biology will soon follow. You know.
Mm. Yeah, no, I like that. I use a concept that I call logical entry gateways to explain pretty much the same thing. Just that every individual has different interests. And for me in particular, if something doesn't interest me, I can't fake it. Like I can't feign interest. It doesn't work. If I'm not genuinely interested in it, it's lost on me. It's useless. My wife gets upset with me for that because like the whole like, oh, if it's important to me, it should be important to you thing. Like
Right.
if it's
Yep.
not interesting, it's not interesting. Like I'm
You
sorry,
can't fake the
I can't
frown.
make it interesting.
Yeah. Can't
But
fake the frown,
if
unfortunately.
if you can, as an individual, if you can find a thing that you are interested in and you are willing to try, then just do that thing. Start there. And
Yeah.
then what I found in my own journey, at least, is that over time, as you see improvement and want to understand the mechanics of why is this working, why am I feeling better, and you start paying attention, you'll start to notice that the same thing that you're experiencing is also leveraged by something else that you'd previously been closed off to. And you start understanding, well, no, actually, metabolic health is a lot more complex than just this one path. There's multiple different ways to influence the same sort of cascades within our own biology. And so you'll start to become more open to trying that next thing. And over time, this can compound and you start completely revolutionizing your lifestyle structure to things that complement your metabolic well-being rather than detract from. So yeah, pick your logical entry gateway, start there and just keep at it and then learn and do more. And over time, you'll find that horizon naturally broadens.
Mhm. Yeah, it's messy at times, but you'll get there, you
Yeah.
know.
And it's journey. And that's a thing like that for me. And that's a big one. I love to stress that because it is a lifelong journey. It's a lifestyle. It's not quick fix. You never arrive. Like this is stuff that you will do, and it'll change slightly as you age and as circumstances in your life change. But it's foundational stuff that you're going to do day in, day out for the rest of your life because this is what yields health. And you want your health span as high as possible for as long as possible across your lifespan.
Yeah. But one of my main inspirations for this, you know, N of one experiments is Stephen Truntz. My
Mm,
gosh, he does a wonderful job tracking every little thing. He has multiple spreadsheets, I hear, of the way he tracks mineral content, his different fasting protocols, and he seems to have it down to a T where
mm.
Stephen T down to a Stephen T. He does mostly, you know, like I think animal fats, you know, mostly beef. But what's interesting is during fasts he won't have salt water, but he'll have salt capsules. I'm wondering if it's like a stimuli issue where he's being um uh kind of um tempted to eat more
Yeah,
when he has the
yeah, the
salt
taste and
water.
get it going. Yeah.
And gosh, like him, as I was talking about earlier with you before we uh, um, started the podcast, there was John Clary, who I'm helping with creating a fasting group for. He
Mm,
has been in this game for a long time and has a distinct protocol. He has a really high amount of salt, but in those capsules, and um, it's really, really fascinating, but also extremely daunting, despite being in a relatively, you know, like give or take a couple of times, relatively ketogenic state for almost 10 years now. You know,
mm.
they've been at it for so long, and they've really uh brought it down to a science. But as
Yeah,
you said, they're still tinkering, you know, they're
yeah,
still trying different things and seeing what works for them. And a lot of it is uh, to try and optimize
yeah,
more so mental health than physical
mm,
now. It seems like they have their physical health down pat, but their mental health is what they're looking for,
yeah,
you know. And yeah, I just hope that when I go into the field fully as a licensed clinician that I can I can, without any kind of conflicts of interest and something that abides by the code of ethics we have to go by, promote metabolic interventions for mental health because it's
yeah,
so vital. And
yeah. And that it's interesting you say that because with it being emergent at the moment, I imagine it's quite controversial. Like,
mm, yeah,
um,
well, especially if you have different corporations you're affiliated with. You know, if
mm,
you have affiliate links and discount codes, that's completely unethical
yeah,
to have your clients be referred to those particular corporations. So it's really dicey right now. I think the best the best, at least in the US, that I've seen so far is Dr. Matt Bernstein's psychosocial rehab clinic at in Massachusetts.
Mm,
And they have, to my knowledge, they have a set, schedule where they have catered ketogenic, relatively ketogenic meals. That's for all their clients, and it's really cool. I'm not too sure if they have either supplements or like kind of keto mimics or keto baked goods that they have affiliated with it, but um, I imagine if there were something that I would want to do, it would be something similar in my area. Um,
nice.
so yeah, it's yeah, you're right. It is controversial, but I think so far the Accord Clinic by Ellen Horn in Massachusetts, that's probably the gold standard right now
Mm,
for ketogenic based psychosocial
yeah.
rehabs.
Well, my hope is that as the passage of time continues, and I base this on when I started the ketogenic diet in 2018, it was new-ish, like not everywhere, but certainly within the circles I was moving. Like I'd never heard of it before. I
Mm.
came across it because I was desperate to avoid calorie restriction. Like I'm
Okay.
a red-blooded South African male. I love food. I went to boarding
Mhm.
school. I grew up with a dad who would finish his meal and then start eating yours if you still had food on the plate. If you didn't eat quick, you lost out.
Yeah.
And so I love a big meal, and I used to eat multiple big meals every day of whatever the hell I wanted because I was active, and I'd always grown up believing that as long as I'm active, I can eat what I want.
Yeah.
Um, so when I first got into ketogenic, it was hardly heard of. Like I knew no one in that space. And then I joined a bunch of online forums and Facebook groups and so on and so forth. And I've watched the explosion of that over the last 80 years. It's grown massively. And my hope is that the same is going to happen now with metabolic psychiatry. It's new and emergent at the moment. But give it a bit of time, and it gets adopted into standard of practice for mental illness, where you understand that the underlying biology is the interface that the mind has to run over, and the two are intrinsically linked, and you can't really separate them. And you should make sure that the underlying biology is properly catered for. And then all of the other therapies have got a better chance of having improved efficacy.
Yeah, because there's too much evidence at this point showing that as psychiatric disorders or psychiatric diagnoses increase, so do metabolic conditions in the same people. And it seems to be that, at least from an emerging model, which Martin Picard actually did come out with a new model. I believe it's called the no, gosh, I can't remember it right now, but it's a way in which it shows how metabolic triage or a conservation of energy then kind of portray or projects out into different physical conditions.
Mm,
Um, and it's really cool stuff, but yeah, it's just hard to say when we'll actually get this going like mainstream in the psychiatric
yeah. But
facilities,
it,
and like
it just needs more people like your good self, Dr. Palmer, Dr. Eid, Dr. Sethi, and others just
yeah.
continuing to push it, because if the evidence is there, it'll have to be accepted.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, Ben, it's been fantastic talking. Something that I love to ask my guests as we sort of wind up is, if there's one thing that you would like the audience to walk away from this conversation with, and then to have resonate with them, for you, what would that be?
Um, you know, go at your own pace, but given that you're here, pursuing some kind of heightened knowledge in metabolic health, stick to that interest. Don't beat yourself up when you come across all different kinds of people that seem to have it all together and have completely optimized themselves to the fullest, and just take it one day at a time,
Mm,
whether it be physical or mental health, just take it one day at a time and keep learning. Keep learning.
nice. Nice. I keep saying to my daughter, the comparison is the thief of joy. She's
Yeah.
11 now, and she's at that age where the sort of jealousy and envy has started to set in for different classmates and then different people at school. And it's like comparison is the thief of joy. Like, I aim to be the best possible version of yourself. Your only competitor is who you were yesterday. Like, be that a little bit better today, and that's it. You've won.
Absolutely.
Well, Ben, thank you. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Ricky. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching the episode. I hope that you found the conversation meaningful and informative, and I hope that it has empowered you with some tools and insights that you can take to tweak and improve your own lifestyle approach in pursuit of optimal metabolic health outcomes. If you've enjoyed the episode, and if you're enjoying the podcast, I'd like you to do me the kindness of please subscribing to the channel, giving it a like, maybe even giving it a share. Help to raise awareness and get the podcast in front of as many viewers as possible, because it is my passion to try and help as many people as possible to understand more of the nuance around metabolic health and how to tweak their lifestyle in pursuit of optimal outcomes. Also, if you have any constructive feedback, things that you think I could improve on, any critiques, any criticisms, please do feed them back. I give you my solemn word that I will take them seriously, and I will, to the best of my ability, work to improve and to give you a more refined and more targeted product as a result of your feedback. So I will take it seriously, and I'll do what I can to improve the show. But again, thank you very much for watching. Keep thriving.